Well, hello, everyone. This has been a wonderful Delta Heritage Forum. We've really enjoyed all the sessions and the participation, everybody's involvement in this process. And I feel like our team has learned a lot, just listening to what's happening out in the Delta, and then the conversation around the different planning activities that are going on with planning right now. So what we wanted to focus on for this last session is the management plan itself. At the beginning of the forum, Blake gave a good overview of what happens with the planning process and where we are in the process. And what we want to do is look specifically at the management plan itself for the next little bit. Those of you who have been to some of our other meetings are probably familiar with the purpose of the management plan, but maybe for some of you who may be new to the process, I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes talking about what the management plan is and why it's important. And then we'll talk about some of the things that we see that are emerging through this planning process over the last year that are now at the point of consideration for inclusion, for further development and consideration for inclusion in the management plan. So a management plan is a document that will guide the heritage area for at least the next 10 years. But the plan itself will also document this process to confirm that it emerged from an in-depth process of community engagement and research and feedback to develop the goals and strategies that are in the plan. The management plan also serves as an education and a marketing tool. So as you go forward, as the heritage area develops, more people hear about it, want to become involved, want to know about it. This is the document that they can start with to understand how it all came to be, what's happening, and where they can join in the process. It also gives you a roadmap. It tells you where are you going in the future and helps you make decisions. There are probably endless number. We could start today and make endless lists of things that the National Heritage Area could do, but what we want to do is to decide what those things are that are most appropriate, and then provide a guide for decision making, because we know that even when this document is completed, it's not sealed, that opportunities will continue to emerge as the years go by. And so this document also needs to provide that guide for decision making. It also helps in evaluation. So at different intervals throughout the years, you can stop and look back and say, are we accomplishing what we set out to accomplish? Do we need to make any adjustments, additions, other things to make sure that we are truly doing what we set out to do and what we wanted to do? And then, of course, one of the most important things is it fulfills the requirements of the authorizing legislation. As we know, national heritage areas are designated by Congress, and with that designation comes some specific requirements of what needs to happen, and one of those is developing the management plan itself. So it's a very lengthy document, but just to look specifically at what it says the management plan will be and will do, it will show that it's an integrated cooperative approach. We'll look at protection, enhancement, interpretation of all of the resources in the National Heritage Area. So that's really what we've been working toward. And we're going to talk about some of these specific things in this next hour, but also just to be clear, the interpretation and what Katie was talking about is a foundational part of the management plan. So all of these, it's like putting a puzzle together. All these pieces that we're working on right now will come together in this document. So the final management plan will include a number of different things. It will include the story, the interpretive piece that's being developed now, the story or the stories. As Linda pointed out with the Delta, there's an embarrassment of riches and stories, so many things to tell and stories to share, but then also looking at what those places are. And that was brought up in the previous conversations about connecting story to place. So that when people come to the Delta or when they live here, they're able to not only know what happened, but they're able to connect it to specific places. Looking at who the partners are is critical. We're going to be talking more about roles for the Heritage Area Coordinating Entity, and a key part of that is the partnership. So it's not called a management entity, it's called a coordinating entity, because that's such a key part of what the National Heritage Area is all about, is bringing together all of these partners. As I said, identifying what the role is, and then of course the crucial funding. How are we going to pay for all the things that we want to do? And that's something that we'll be looking at in more detail in the coming months as we become a little bit more clear on what some of these projects and programs could be. So as we have been working on this over the past year, a little over a year, there have been lots of meetings, task groups working on this, outreach to various groups, just coming at this from a lot of different directions, and then trying to compile what we have. It's sort of like, as Katie was talking about with the themes, there are so many stories, so many opportunities to tell different stories. And so you kind of get all those, the mass of all those together, and then begin trying to sort through them and organize them in a fashion that can be useful and understandable. And that's what we've been doing with what might be projects and programs that the National Heritage Area could undertake. And so what we want to share this evening is what we're calling emerging action areas. We're not yet at the point of saying these are goals and strategies that will come in after the first of the year. So what we're looking at is these are the key things that we keep hearing over and over, that keep getting brought up, keep getting shared as potential areas of focus, action areas for the National Heritage Area. And as you can see, there are 4 of these. And that's what we want to talk with you all about this evening. Along with these, so we have these 4: tourism, development, and promotion. That one has come up a lot. That'll be the first thing we talk about. Culture and living traditions, recreation, and then preservation of the built environment and conservation of natural resources. So with that, with those 4 categories, we have to think not only about what is it that the Heritage Area could do, we also have to think about what is the role of the Heritage Area. And so I wanted to share this at the outset of our conversation, and then again at the end of this session, Augie's going to talk about this in more depth when we talk about next steps. But we need to think about it. If we say, oh, it'd be great to have driving tours and walking tours. Well, what is the role of the Heritage Area? Is it the organizer bringing everybody together, maybe giving a little grant funding? Is it actually developing the project, being the implementer, taking that on as a key or a signature project for the Heritage Area? Is it providing technical assistance? Maybe sometimes, occasionally funding isn't the primary need, it's just resources, expertise to help get that project underway. Providing funding as a direct source of funding beyond just seed money, helping write grants, helping obtain sponsorship, other activities that would come under that category of funding. And then as a promoter, helping to create awareness and interest in the region. One of the things we've heard over and over is people don't know we're here. They don't know all the great things that are here and all the opportunities in the Delta to experience these things. And so is that an appropriate role? So just kind of hold those in your thoughts as we talk about these 4 categories, and then we'll address them again at the end. So before we move into the first of the 4 action areas of tourism development and promotion, I'll just stop there and ask, are there any questions, comments, or questions about the big picture of the management plan itself? Any? Okay. All righty. Everybody's got it down pat now. So the first action area that we identified is tourism development and promotion. And as I said, one of the things I'd say, just without exception, anybody we talked to, any meeting that we've had, information we've gathered, the comment is made of the need to raise awareness of the Delta as a place. And that was actually set as a goal in the feasibility study that was done a number of years ago, helping to increase recognition of the Delta as a place and to convey its cultural, historic, recreational, and natural resources, and the opportunity to bring visitors here. That this is a National Heritage Area. It's the first one in California, which is very significant, and it is a unique place, which is one of the reasons it was designated a National Heritage Area. So just this need to raise awareness is one of the major action items, action areas that has come out. And then also just the need for somebody to, an organization to do the destination marketing. So tourism, heritage tourism, cultural tourism, ecotourism, all of those things packaged together has come up many, many times. And what we've heard, I've listed just some of the things that have been put forth, is that in some cases there are some organizations, there are some attractions, there are some museums, there are some people who are doing some of this or pieces of this, but that there isn't currently kind of that umbrella organization that in a lot of places it's called the destination marketing organization, fulfilling that role. And so if you look at all of these things that have been suggested of, well, we need to organize when people come into the Delta, where can they get their information? Do we have visitor information centers? Where are they? Should we have more? The whole idea of market research and target markets, there's been recent research done looking a lot at the recreational visitor to the Delta, some really good data, but market research is ongoing. It's in a continual process of understanding not only who are the markets for the Delta, but what's going on in the larger world. And we've definitely seen that in the last year and a half, almost 2 years, as the tourism industry has taken a direct hit because of COVID. But going forward, just understanding those forces and what's in place, who the markets are, and how do you reach them. So everything from promotions to wayfinding to information centers to media coverage, those types of things, to be able to get the word out, let people know that the Delta's here, it's open for business, welcoming visitors. And then in addition to wayfinding, advocating for infrastructure. So the question was raised of, the need for accommodations, the need for places for people to spend money, basically shopping or dining. And could the heritage area play a role in at least in advocating for that? So these 2 areas, this kind of raise awareness, and then who's going to do it, who's going to take a leadership role, that's what's really emerged as an action area. So I'm going to turn the screen off again so that we can all see each other, and then I'd like to hear your feedback on a couple of questions. One is, should tourism be a priority for the National Heritage Area, and if so, what should the role, in your thoughts, what should the role of the National Heritage Area be? Should it be a leadership role? And so I'll put those 2 two questions out and invite, I guess, for comments, if folks will raise your hand, and we'll spend a little time on this, and then we'll move on to the others because we want to touch on all four in the amount of time that we have. So I'll try to be mindful of our time here, but I'll start with Robert.
Yes, I wondered how you plan to interface with what I would call the other businesses in the Delta. That is to say that in addition to tourism, of course, the Delta is a major agricultural area, and it's also very much part of California's water system, maybe the heart of it. And what we do here often would seem to collide with some of the goals that they have. For example, if we build tunnels that interfere with heritage towns, for example, or if certain agricultural decisions are made in terms of water, how does the heritage area interface with the other things that are going on in the Delta?
And that's a good question. I think that's something we want to make note of and explore. We are going to be touching on a couple of those things in these next action areas. We're going to be talking about things like recreation, agriculture, and that kind of thing. So, so that's a good question to bring up at the beginning. And if we can kind of keep that in mind as we're talking about these other areas, that's always a question with tourism. When you're thinking about heritage tourism or cultural tourism, is how does it fit within the community and not and become an asset, not a disruption, become something positive. So I don't know that we have an answer to that question tonight, but it's definitely something we want to be mindful of and make note of. So thank you for that. And Linda, did you have a comment?
Yeah, it looks like the way it's not on the screen anymore, but that the way the tourists are characterized, it seems like they're tourists from elsewhere, from outside the region. And I think that in this case, maybe it would be worth speaking to or you know, being mindful of at least that the Delta is kind of a little hidden. I mean, we live in, this is the most populous state in the country. And, you know, many of the tourists are going to come from the Bay Area, the very, you know, crowded Bay Area once people know how to do that. And so some kind of balance, some way for the residents and the communities in the Delta to protect their sense of place from being overrun by, you know, a big tourism initiative would be, I would think that would be welcome to the communities.
And we have had a number of conversations about that, even people nearby, you know, that, so we're not necessarily, a tourist doesn't have to be somebody coming from New York. And that's part of understanding the market and what those, you know, who's already coming, who's nearby that might come over and spend a day, that kind of thing. So those were some of the conversations that we've had, but understanding that more was also identified as a need.
Okay, good.
So, yeah, so that's great. Elizabeth?
Thanks. So there are other businesses too. I really appreciate what Bob was saying is we have shipping and refineries in the Delta, in the Coquina Strait and through the Delta. And that requires some dredging and there might be some other conflicts with some environmental goals that would enhance the natural resources, which are for tourism. So I think we need to acknowledge that. They may actually be partners in the future. I'm not trying to paint them as bad guys and simply saying we need to be realistic that those are major industries.
Great. Okay. Other thoughts, comments? Is there any feedback on the idea of the National Heritage Area taking on a role of some type, to be determined, but some type of role connected to tourism development and or promotion? thoughts on that. I see Stephen. Stephen, are you there? Can't. Stephen, did you want to make a comment?
Oh, sorry. Organizing dinner. I think the point, I raised this point in Benicia as well, and that is that, this area is adjacent to, one of the global destinations, Napa Valley. It's right next to the Bay Area. The second largest tourist attraction in terms of people is the San Francisco waterfront, second only to Disneyland. So the tourism question is really not necessarily how to create a place that'll attract on its own, but also to, how does it relate to these other global destinations?
Okay.
And I think that's a different spin necessarily than the typical economic development sort of Midwest Rust Belt tourist building kind of an approach.
Okay. Great, thank you. And Lenora, and then we'll move on. So we have time for our other three categories after Lenora. So.
Well, I think we always hear about people not knowing what and where the Delta is. And if the National Heritage Area doesn't focus on tourism, then we're not showing people where the Delta is and what the Delta is all about.
Thank you. Good point. All right. I want to emphasize also, this is a continuing conversation. So our discussion this evening is another step in that direction. But this is a conversation we're continuing to collect information and will be a work in progress. So even though we're spending a brief amount of time on each one of these action areas, we'll be revisiting these in the weeks and months to come. So I'm going to pull the PowerPoint back up again and then turn it over to, I believe, Nancy, you're next. Show. Okay, Nancy,
Thank you, Carolyn. Yep, I sure am. It just takes a minute to get all those buttons pressed. So, thank you.
I have to figure out where everything is. So,
exactly.
Okay, it's yours.
So another of the major topic areas that we have been looking at are culture and living traditions. And within that, there are a few topic areas that kind of rose to the surface so far, but this is also the action area that has drawn the fewest comments so far. And a lot of the things that are happening are excuse me, a lot of the things that were, sorry, I have traffic coming through my house just as I start. So a lot of the culture and living tradition action items that have been suggested so far are actually connected to tourism opportunities. So we know that there's more work to be done in this area, but we wanted to just talk about the three things that seem to be rising to the surface so far. The first thing is agritourism and food, highlighting the region's agritourism, the promotion of local restaurants, culinary traditions, breweries, wineries. There was, of course, the Delta Farm and Winery Trail, and several times it's been brought up the importance of trying to assess and the potential to reactivate that trail. And also, like I said, the curation of Delta culinary traditions. Another action area is tribal history and culture. And at first, there was very little happening with that, but with the recent kind of push for a subcommittee that is specifically working on this, and of course, involving tribal members from the area groups, there have been some more specific suggestions like connecting to connecting the tribes back to native places, essentially, helping facilitate right of access and interpreting meaning. Also, facilitating stewardship opportunities for Native people concerning water resources, burning, plant and animal life, supporting educational programs that facilitate intergenerational knowledge, and then elevating ethnobotany, providing opportunities to document and interpret and experience food supplies and plant materials used for traditional practices. So there have been some more concrete things there. The third action area here are ethnic groups, and there are going to be many opportunities to tell the stories and share the history and traditions of the many groups that have come through the region through time. We do not have specific actions that came out of the last round of public meetings for these. However, with Blake's recent work with the Asian and Pacific Islander heritage groups, that's a really important partnership for identifying some action areas. So, and as well as there are going to be other opportunities. We know we have, Little Manila in Stockton, and there are many other cultural organizations, Japanese, Chinese, Sikh, Portuguese, some great stuff happening that we need to then pull into the management plan. So I'm going to do the same thing, and I am going to kill the PowerPoint for a second, and so we can have a brief discussion. And the question I want to throw out there first is that what we've received in the public meetings so far, there really seems to be looking at culture and living traditions through a tourism lens. Is that an appropriate lens, or do we need to go deeper than that? Stephen Herringer, if you want to make a comment, that'd be great.
Yes, thank you. Would be remiss at this point if I didn't mention what we were in the process of doing in Clarksburg with our 1883 schoolhouse, and it really crosses the gamut of all of the three segments that you just outlined. In the resurrection of the building, we're looking at it's going to be a Delta Welcome Center at the north end of the Delta. We are working with the Indian tribes to recreate some Indian cultural village information. We're working to capture stories from previous generations through an oral history project. We're working with the schools in the area to bring students in for educational history. I mean, we've got partnerships set up already, even though we've been on a pretty long trajectory to get this project off the ground, but it is literally off the ground now, and we're very excited about the way it's going, and it will be. I think it will be a absolute gem for people coming into the Delta as an informational center and a point where they can access information about everything, trails, everything that we've covered. We're so excited about falling right into that wheelhouse. So.
Thank you. I think you're right. It is going to be a really important node for getting people out and understanding the culture and history of the Delta. So does anyone else have a comment about seeing living traditions through a tourism lens? Lenora.
Sorry, I had muted myself. But to me, tourism and education go hand in hand, because whenever you're going someplace, you're going to learn about what the other place is about. So if we're focusing on tourism as an educational component, then I think we have the best of both worlds.
That is wonderful. And that's a great segue to my next question, which is, are there opportunities for educational programs? You have the less formal interpretive educational programs, but then you also have the formal educational programs with school groups and special interest groups. Is there an interest in those types of activities? Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's, if we're talking about school groups, I think that kind of, a lot of them are already doing that, and there's a lot of great curricula out there and a lot of programs around the perimeter and even deeper into the Delta. So I think the NHA could support those things. I think it would take a good survey of what's there already to see if there's some common role we can play to support those things, and maybe actually add a component of awareness of the NHA in those.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we need to do any development of curriculum and activities. There's a great stuff out there already, existing programs, but somehow imbuing this idea that there is a Delta National Heritage Area, so it's not just we locals think it's such a great spot.
That's a really great way to circle the wagons on that one. Little interference. All right.
Sorry, I was trying to figure out where that came from, but it was a little, it's like being a detective here. So make sure that you're muted if you're, okay. Hopefully that might have eliminated it. Oh, Nancy? I can't hear you.
Maybe, Nancy, we can't hear you. Maybe we'll go on and let Augie will be talking about the next two. And then if your sound works, then we can come back. Or if anyone has any additional comments, we can take those. We seem to have lost Nancy's lost the sound for some reason. Is it working? Okay. I think I saw Robert has your hand up, and so we'll take that comment and then we'll move on to Augie. So
I think there is both in education and in visitor centers. There are initiatives having been started in the education. I believe the Delta Protection Commission has had an ongoing project using, I believe, the Sacramento School District to create a curriculum for the Delta. And I know the Discover the Delta Foundation in Rio Vista is trying to fund a building which would be a visitor center. So there's a coordinative role here, as I think more than a initiative role on those two areas.
great. Thank you. Okay. Let's move on. We've still got a couple more to talk about. And Augie, are you there? And I'll call up the PowerPoint again. You there?
Carolyn, I went out and came back in if you want me to continue on with the next section.
Okay. Well, I was watching our time and we were just getting ready to transition to Augie. So I think we're okay. That was strange. I don't know what that was.
I don't either. I wasn't muted.
Yeah, that was very strange. It sounded like a train coming through and then you were gone. Let me call this back up and, okay, Augie, it's yours.
Oh, actually, Carolyn, I'm recreation. That's why I suggested of going back in.
I'm sorry. I thought Augie was doing recreation. Okay.
Nope.
Okay. Well, then I'm glad your sound is working
There we
again.
go.
Okay,
Sure.
okay.
Okay, so with the action area for recreation, the direct action that dominated this discussion were were basically land recreation and water recreation. And for land, the Great Delta Trail is absolutely critical. And Linda said, I think it was Linda said something interesting earlier as she was talking about trying to find that distinction between the Great Delta Trail and the National Heritage Area. And my thought at the time was that I'm not sure there needs to be a distinction. Actually, they are both they're both dealing with a living landscape. They're both dealing with you know, all of these amazing opportunities. It's just that, and someone said this to me with a different heritage area long ago, people don't know how to engage with a national heritage area, but they know what to do with a trail. And so for the public who's coming to this area, or for residents, having that seamless experience of being in a national heritage area and experiencing the heritage area through the Great Delta Trail seems to me a really good connection. Between the planning for the trail, the rec planning that was done a long time ago, there are lots and lots of actions that are really kind of baked in and getting ready to go in the heritage area that don't need to be pulled out separately as a part of the planning process. I think bringing these things together is going to be what the most important thing is, because the Great Delta Trail presents the best opportunity for pedestrians, biking, and driving. Another recreational opportunity that was identified as having some great possibilities is bird watching. So that's another thing to keep your eye on, quote, to coin a phrase. Early on in the meetings today, people focused on water, and certainly in the public meetings we've had, water transportation, water trails, access to water, water safety, all of those types of actions also have been brought up over and over as the thing that makes the Delta the Delta. And so I think there will be some really good possibilities there. So can we move back into discussion? Now, hoping my mute doesn't go out again. Should the development of recreational activities be a focus of the National Heritage Area? Ooh, there's silence on that one. You can also, oh, Mike's got his hand up.
I'll be happy to break the silence. I think, again, we have an awful lot of folks who are providing that already. And there are things that are happening. If we could lend a hand as the NHA to maybe do some completions, like lend support behind particular projects. I'm not sure if that's allowed in the legislation or not. Going out and as an NHA, aside, I think, from programs that kind of coordinating the recreation efforts that are there, and again, informing providers that they are operating within an NHA and how can that be a benefit to them. By doing, by doubling up on efforts that other folks are already doing, not that it'll lead to any, well, it might lead to some bitterness or something like that, but we're doubling one effort and leaving one out. So I think that coordinated effort and that initial survey would be a great way to go. Thanks.
That is also leading to one of the other questions I have, which is what should the NHA's role be? And Mike is laying out a really good idea there. Are there some other comments or thoughts about the development of recreational activities or what the NHA's role should be? Julie? Julie, we're going to come back to you. I see your hand up, but we don't hear you. So I'm going to call on Stephen next because I think he's ready to go. Whoops, we can't hear Stephen either, and he does not seem to be on mute. Give it a try. Nope, still can't hear you. Okay, Stephen and Julie, we're coming back to you. We're going to Lenora.
I think that's where some of our partnerships and partnering with already established groups will come in, with the boaters and the yacht clubs and the marinas and any other formal activity that's going on that we have an opportunity to expose visitors to the Delta on.
Thank you. That's a really good point. There are a lot of water-based groups out there already to be able to kind of convene, connect, and tap into what's going on. Julie?
Can you hear me now?
We sure can.
Okay, great. So in the DWR Environmental Justice Community Survey, there was a lot of people who live in the primary and secondary zone of the Delta who really would like more access to recreation. A lot of land is locked up in private ownership, and there isn't a lot of places, if you don't have a lot of money, there isn't a lot of places where you can get into the water, you can fish from a bank and park and have a bathroom. And so I think if the NHA advocated for like reopening the state park and making sure that there was a lot more access created for the people who already live here, there would be less resentment about visitors coming from outside. But if all of the focus is on visitors and not people who already sort of see themselves as living in the Delta, then I think that could set up a conflict. So I do think that the National Heritage Area can play a role in making sure there's a balance, and also in just making sure that all those kinds of different recreation needs are looked at.
That's a great point. I'm going to take time to try and find Stephen again if he can get his audio working, and then that might be the last comment we have time for right now. Is that right, Carolyn? Okay. Oh no! Can you put it in the chat? Okay. Well, unfortunately, yeah, we can't hear you. But if you reach out to Blake and, email Blake at some point and get your thoughts, and we'll gather them that way. So, all right. Thank you. Carolyn, back to you.
And I'll turn it over to Augie.
Glad that you came in right at the point on that recreation one, because I was lost, but I could wing it, Anyway, this next action is preservation of the built environment and conservation of natural resources. And what we've heard a lot over the last year or so, and particularly in the last couple public meetings in Benicia and Walnut Grove, when we were out there at the end of August, beginning of September, was that your towns, your communities, and your region really struggle with this. There is this clash between the need to preserve, which we have in all of our towns, a lot in the heritage areas, the need to build, to provide for one instance, adequate housing for folks. And then how does all that affect the conservation of natural resources, your water, your agriculture, and for that matter, take out the natural resources and let's just go to the historic resources. How does it affect the quality of your historic communities as a whole? You know, we've heard that tourism is a great thing, and a lot of communities want it. You often have to be careful what you wish for, right? Because a lot of tourists can change the image of a place. It can literally physically change a place. It can change the quality and the character of a place. I guess that's the word I'm struggling for. If you bring more development, if you bring more buildings, if you bring more residents, how do you manage that in a transportation network that, for the most part, sits atop a levee system? How do you manage those? How do you manage those extra tourists? And in some of your communities, you already have a lot of traffic issues that you're contending with. So you know, that's a 30,000 foot quick brush of some of this discussion around building or preservation of the built environment and the conservation of resources. What heritage areas do as we get into these four topics, as they struggle with this in other parts of the country, is sometimes they tend to become more or less a back of the house type of entity. And what I mean by that is there are organizations out there maybe working on some of this that might need a little bit of support or a lot of support. Education, when we put it here on this slide, we don't necessarily mean education in the sense of schooling, but what we're talking about is education in the sense of information delivery that can help communities and organizations working in those communities that are already working on these subjects advance their missions so that you work in partnership with those out there, and the heritage area as a partnership network is advancing this. One of the things other heritage areas tend to do is become advocates in either a very silent, subtle way or actually a quite vocal way. And, you know, there was a lot of discussion about whether or not the heritage area could do this or what role it could play, particularly because it's within a state agency, right? But the advocacy doesn't have to be only done by the Delta Protection Commission. The advocacy becomes the advocacy of the National Heritage Area. And when we say that term, you all are the National Heritage Area. Remember what Carolyn said early on this evening. The Heritage Area coordinating entity brings everybody together and they coordinate and help orchestrate the activity, but they're not in any management or governance role in this designation that Congress has given you. All of this relates to the need for more money, and we all struggle with that. How do we get all the things done that we need to do with the limited resources that we have? And the struggle between organizations with those resources, and even where those resources can be had, like at governmental entities, maybe at the county level or at the state level, what are all those overwhelming demands now being put on those entities that create maybe grant programs to decline that would go out and help these organizations? You know, one of the most interesting things I learned when I was out there in August and September is that funding priorities for counties, one of the top priorities is the administrations of towns and communities. Because I think I got this right, within the whole Delta or within this one county maybe, there's only one incorporated town, and that was Isleton. All the other towns and communities are unincorporated entities. And so it falls on the county government, which stretches their resources a whole lot more And therefore, as much as they'd like to be involved in maybe supporting projects that communities want to do in this heritage development node, they just can't do it because they have other priorities that are more pressing and needing for those communities. The last thing that heritage areas do is they really do become that direct action implementer. Because a lot of times some heritage areas, the whole social economic network has just collapsed because of the history. We see that a lot in some of the industrial communities that have heritage areas designated in them. Rivers of Steel, where I work, is one of them. As much as those heritage area partners want to do all these things, the capacity is all gone because when the mills close or the mines close, or whatever the other industry might be, their textile mills, that whole structure of the social network, the economic network, and the governmental network collapse because of this industrialist paternalist system that was developed out of the 1800s and 1900s. So what I want to know in this discussion is if you had to pick of those four, what do you think is the most important role that the heritage area could play in providing, when I say a service, I don't want you to think of it as a service, but in providing some support, I guess is a better way to put it, back to your communities. What do you need the most in the towns and the regions that you work in? And I'm going to look for hands. I see none. You all are perfectly good. Need no help. Need no extra.
Well, Augie, I'm always good to fill a void. Could you, the four ones again, we had education, advocacy, and the other two were?
And let me pull it up.
Sure.
Education, advocacy, funding,
And what was that last one, sorry?
action.
Mm-hmm. I think that, my take would be again that, we're recognizing we're coming in kind of the middle of the movie, and there are a lot of already existing things that I see advocacy as a way of getting at a lot of different things. And that will be our earliest way of tying or becoming aware of all these different groups and opportunities that are out there. So my first thought is advocacy, but does it change? Can it change over time? Can the role actually change?
Good. And you make a good point, Mike. A lot of times a heritage area, they don't have to do something that they created from the start. A lot of times they're just filling a niche, some void that's out there within a community. So as you say, there's already a lot of opening, but it might be that there might be an opening that they can fill that supports it even more. So yeah, they could do that. And these things can change over time. I will tell you this, having worked for a heritage area now for close to 30 years, the minute your management plan's done, probably within a month or two or three, something's going to come up that no one had any clue of, right? And you're going to say, what the heck do we do? What you want to make sure is you have a management plan that's flexible and nimble and allows the coordinating entity and the partners to be able to address those things, because whether it's a month or two from now or a year from now, remember, you got a 10-year management plan. There is definitely going to be a lot of changes in that 10-year period that you need to be able to adapt to. Yeah. Your hand is up.
Lenora?
Yeah.
I have to echo what Julie was saying just a little while ago about advocacy and education, because people in the primary Delta need to feel like their needs are being met. That would be advocacy, and educating the county or the local government would be part of what the NIH could do.
And Carolyn brings up that next slide, not to end the conversation, but maybe to help this along. You know, these roles that are played by heritage areas, we looked at the 55 national heritage areas out there. And in some form or fashion, they are all doing one of these. Some of them are doing several of these. A few of them are doing all of these. And it isn't they're doing all because nothing like this exists. They're doing it. So some of us came out of the pure community organizing background, bringing everybody together, being a convener of partners, because we all know there's few things in this world that we do on a community level that is done exclusively by one organization. It oftentimes takes at least one other partner, but many times several others. But the heritage area can become the project implementer. They could become the organization that advances a preservation project, a trail building project, a river conservation project. They could be the one that is advancing and working with the county economic development agency, for example. And all of these things have a benefit to oftentimes quality of, not just for residents, but to help attract businesses, because you change the appearance of a community in a good way. This technical assistance role is another one of those. You heard me say earlier, back of the house type of facility or organization. So many times our partners have incredible years, but we're all doing so much that we don't have the time or maybe even the knowledge or expertise to do to help advance the organization that we're volunteering for. And so is there bookkeeping services? Is there fund grant writing? Is there, you know, a lot of times organizations will say, well, help us write the grant, but they're not even in a capacity role to manage the grant once it comes, you know, because that money, when it comes, there's conditions with that. Not only managing it so you get the project done and spend the money properly, but then reporting back to the granting agency. So it isn't just writing the grant that they often need to help on. They'll discover quickly after the fact that they don't have the capacity for that. So a heritage area can play that role. Many heritage areas actually give money out. They aren't huge grants. Most oftentimes they range between $5,000 and $25,000, depending upon how much money they can set aside out of their funding each year. But these become critical grants oftentimes because they are seed investments to help kickstart a project along. And so heritage area can play that role. And for a very good number, high number of heritage areas, they're a promoter. They are the advocate. They are the public relations arm. They are the ones putting the face and the attention on these communities that just don't have that type of marketing and public relations capacity. And so you're creating that awareness. And when you do that, it isn't just to sell the community to people on the outside. You know, many times we have to promote ourselves to ourselves, right? Because we're oftentimes our hardest critics to each other. And if you're trying to attract somebody to your town, whether it's a visitor or a business for that matter, the last thing you need is for the residents to be down on.
Augie, your audio went out, but that may be a good thing because we're at that 5 minutes point that we hit so often. Actually, you have less than 5 minutes. You don't have any audio.
Okay. Something went wrong with the audio. We will wrap up there at that point. We did want to share with you the timeline of the development of the management plan, so you can see where we've come a long way in this past year with putting together committees, beginning to do outreach, having public meetings. So we've made some great progress in this year. After the first of the year, we'll pick it up again. We'll be working on more outreach to stakeholders. We'll be doing a survey to try to reach even more people who maybe couldn't come to a public meeting. And then we'll begin working on vision and mission statements that will be included in the management plan. And we'll also be thinking about the organizational structure, how the National Heritage Area as a coordinating entity will be organized and operate. And then we'll begin moving into developing goals and strategies, and having another round of public meetings. The whole process is just do a lot of work, process it, go back out and ground truth it again, so that we end up with a final product that is a management plan that has been built by the communities, by the people who live in the Delta, and it's something that everyone is engaged with and feels that they can sign on for that. So I will stop there if there are any questions or comments as we close, and then I'll turn it back over to Blake. I think we have a couple more quick things to do before we wrap up. So any questions, comments? Okay. And Blake, are you with us? I'm not seeing your name there.
I am right here.
There you are.
Actually,
there you are. Okay,
yes.
I'll turn it back over to you. Thanks.
Yes, I'm actually in a few different places because for some reason my name got attached to a few other people that were listening in. So I just wanted to thank Carolyn and Augie and Nancy for all the work that they've done to this point, and for the work that they did tonight. And so I just wanted to, Mike, oh yeah, I guess that was a applause for Point HDC. So I just wanted to let you know that the next NHA Advisory Committee meeting is going to be Thursday, December 2nd. So that's just for those of you, there are some of you that are already on the advisory committee, but I at least want to mention that to other people that might not be aware of that. It's a really good opportunity to kind of find out what's going on with the process and where we are with the management plan. Obviously, we will be going out back out to the general public soon for a lot of things, but the NHA Advisory Committee meetings are public, so we're more than happy to have people listen in who are kind of just want to keep track of what's going on with the process. So with that, one of the things I wanted to mention, one brief thing, which is related to something that was mentioned earlier, and then we can take a quick break before going into the lightning talks. One of the things that was mentioned earlier was the Section 106 process that's going on with the Delta Conveyance project right now. And the reason why I'm mentioning that right now is that it is something that's relevant to Delta Heritage. Specifically, one of the things that the Section 106 is a federal process which really analyzes what is going on with historic resources within a certain area and what might be some ways to mitigate or minimize any impacts on those historic resources because of a project. So one of the things that we will be contacting you about when I'm doing the follow-up for the forum is that we'd like to keep you involved in what's going on with the Section 106 process. Obviously, people like you are really interested in the heritage of the area, and so it seems like this is a relevant relevant information for you in terms of what you might want to do and if you want to be of any assistance. The commission is involved in the Section 106 process, and so we encourage any information on in terms of things that you might think might be impacted. And anyway, we'll be reaching out by email in the next day or so, and I think that's an important process to know about.